2, 3. Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How's everybody doing this afternoon?
Outstanding.
Outstanding. Outstanding. As introduced, I'm Gunnery Sergeant Williams, the Director of Operations for Historical Outreach Programming for the United States Marine Corps Historical Company. Myself and my fellow Marines are going to do a small presentation for you today. It's the same type of dog and pony show we do throughout, like that, showing the tactical capabilities of the United States Marines. The only difference being is we're going to show the tactical doctrine developed in the United States Marine Corps 75 years ago. At the end of World War II, we started developing tactics that we utilize that are still serving us well today. But before we actually get into the talk, I want you to think a little bit about why you're here. Why is this a Museum of Americans in Wartime important, and why you're here studying history? It's all about people. You look at these tanks, all these assets that we've seen here out here today, they're nothing more than inanimate objects. It takes the people like you and I, throughout every generation, to design, build, and ultimately use these weapons in combat. And we can thank each and every one of them for being who we are today, because we literally stand on the shoulders of every generation that went before us. So you see this demonstration, although these are current United States Marines, they're the epitome of what those Marines 75 years ago be. These veterans we have sitting in front of us, some of which are members of the generation that fought in World War II, these Marines were them 75 years ago, and we'll talk about it. Now, if you look at the Marines in front of you, this is going to be an element we're going to talk about specifics and changes of tactical doctrine that took place during World War II. Going into World War II, the standard Marine and Army rifle squad was 8 to 12 men. It had a squad leader, an assistant squad leader, and one Browning automatic rifle, basically squad automatic weapon. As we went into the Pacific War, we started realizing, especially in jungle warfare, that span of control of one squad leader trying to control up to 11 men underneath him and like that was too much. And we also needed the flexibility, the idea of having a maneuver element and then a base of fire element with the BAR like that did not give us adequate flexibility. So the concept originally developed by the Raiders, by Red Mike Epson in the 1st Raider Battalion, started looking at the idea of taking the rifle squad and breaking it down into smaller elements and also applying more NCOs to be able to control those smaller elements. These various elements, which we would know as fire teams, would give us the capability of functioning as a rifle squad, giving flexibility of reversing roles from a maneuver element immediately over to a base of fire element. It also means that could necessarily function independently. Originally, a rifle squad had a corporal as the NCO in charge. That is when we had enough NCOs to go around. Sometimes the PFC would become commanding a rifle squad. In this particular case, we got a Master Gunnery Sergeant, the likes of Mr. Dudo, is acting as the squad leader. He would have a command group for a platoon. That command group would include a radio operator, like that, which, like every radio in every war, never works when you need it to. And like I say, this particular one like that is carrying an SCR 300, the famous walkie-talkie of the period. Now, you can walk and talk with it, but that radio is going to get mighty tired by the time he gets done today. This is an AM or FM frequency radio. It was primarily used for shore-based commands for communication. We also had the inevitable doc. And like that, our corpsman was the quintessential part and inseparable part of the Marines, just like it is today. Every Marine depended on him. Their lives were in the hands of the doc like that when he came into combat. He carried the medical equipment and such, and many of a naval corpsmen, many a Marine owes their life to that corpsman. Now, the basic rifle squad was broken down like that, as I said. That rifle squad now would be increased to a total of 13 men. You would have a sergeant now in charge of the rifle squad, and then 3 corporals underneath him would control the fire teams. Each one of these fire teams would be 4 men. You have a fire team leader, like I say, normally at this point issued with a carbine, although a lot of them would prefer to carry with a standard service rifle and such. Underneath that fire team leader, every fire team would now have a squad automatic weapon, a Browning automatic rifle. That automatic weapon would give them the capability of either being a base of fire element or a maneuver element. It would have an assistant BAR, which would not only carry rifle ammunition for himself, he would carry spare ammunition for that BAR. And firing at 550 rounds per minute with 20-round magazines, that beast is hungry and it's going to drain pretty quick, so the extra ammunition was needed. You also would finish out the fire team like that with an additional rifle. This squad of 4 would be multiplied by 3. This would be your standard rifle squad during the period. This would be accumulated into a platoon with a command element, and like I say, and 3 of these rifle platoons would then make a rifle company. Sergeant?
Right.
Now, while the Marines go over, let's say, load up right now before we start our demonstration, like that, it was talked about a little bit earlier, many of the things you're going to see and like that not only have a history relating to 75 years ago, some of it actually has a more recent history. Talked about the film Flags of Our Fathers, Letters from Iwo Jima, and even the film Wind Talkers. Many of the equipment you see here was developed for those. The flamethrower that you're going to see as part of this demonstration, those that were here this morning, like that is the flamethrower. You've seen just about every World War II film from Flags of Our Fathers back through Wind Talkers and such. Like I say, both directors, John Woo and Clint Eastwood, did not want to go with Hollywood graphics. He wanted to see the real deal. So we ended up shipping that Mark II flamethrower. In fact, ironically, it was so real like that when the stuntman and the actor, when we were doing Flags of Our Fathers in Iceland, saw the flamethrower tested for the first time, says, hey, we want no parts of this. So this young gunnery sergeant that we happen to know ended up having to stunt double, as well as being a technical advisor, ended up stunt doubling all the way in. So the flamethrower you're seeing is the exact same weapon. Much of the equipment you see here, you have actually seen in Hollywood. Now today we're actually using, like say, non-gel gasoline in the flamethrower. We want to build up, burn up Allen's yard too bad, and like that. But eventually we may have to put out a few fires before we get done. Now during the course of history, like say, the LVTs, the amphibious tracks that would lead into our, like say, our LAVs that we use today, our Amtraks, like that, were fairly new innovation. Prior to that, during Guadalcanal, only a very few LVTs were actually utilized. Like that, and eventually we would start coming up with tracked vehicles. Like say, a gentleman in Florida would develop, like say, a vehicle that was used in the swamps and it proved ideal. What you're going to see is an LVT Mark IV. This is the third generation, not the fourth, but actually the third generation. Ironically, for whatever reason, the LVT-3s did not see their introduction until the Korean War. The LVT-4s would have been the quintessential tracked landing craft that would be used during the latter part of the war from Guam, Iwo Jima, and eventually on Okinawa. If you don't start, pull the rope again. They're thinking about it. He pulled harder this time. Now what you're going to see is a fire maneuver like that. Hopefully, as you can see the advancement of troops like that, you can see a basic 13-man rifle squad, alternating the roles with the fire teams from maneuvering elements to basically face the fire elements, leapfrogging toward the enemy. They're also going to be circumvented by, like say, another fire team that's going to be supporting a flamethrower. You're going to see machine guns operated off the vehicles themselves. The use of armor to support an infantry attack became quintessential to much of the Marines' operations in the Pacific Theater. Now moving on to the field, like that, to soften up the target, you have an M4 Sherman tank. Like I say, it has a 76mm gun on top of it. You have a Muldoon machine gun. The downside for that protection, like that gun operator has to stay exposed on top of the tank. Thing is going to sneak out of sight and go play hide and seek with it. Now, interesting enough, building at the time as these Marines move forward, if you look at the Marine uniform, in some respects they look very similar today, and in some respects they're different. World War II marked the very beginning of the first time the United States Marine Corps actually had a dedicated combat uniform. And the new Mark I helmet, pretty much just like what we've been through the last 15 years of the war on terrorism, the beginning of World War II, which saw a rapid increase of technological advancement. By like say Iwo Jima, Okinawa, you saw that reach its pinnacle. The famous herringbone utility and occasionally some camouflage would start coming in, but more quintessentially, the camouflage helmet cover would become an ideal benchmark for the Marine Corps. It was so effective as a psychological tool, as an identifier for Marines, and this is what we talk about even today, standing to the shoulders of every generation. That the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Saipan, I had a team on the island of Saipan. There were some Japanese survivors, some veterans of that campaign. I had one of my Marines completely in World War II utilities with a Mark I helmet with a camouflage helmet cover. Fortunately, that Marine spoke Japanese. He went up and very politely introduced himself to the veteran who had his back to him. The veteran turned around, and 50 years later, the sight of that camouflage helmet cover freaked him out. Like that, that's it again. We think about the weapons technology, but like that, the human element, the psychological warfare like that plays a very, very distinct role in like how we fight combat. Speaking of modern technology, we're even being filmed by a drone. Hope he's not armed.
One of the Grand Crew, one of them shouted to the guy in the people air mission.
That one he only pulled rope one.
Rotating the turret towards the drone, which is perfectly stock still.
Normally these LVTs would carry at least one rifle squad plus ammunition, spare ammunition and such. In many cases they would tow ashore additional flamethrowers like this. By the latter part of World War II, the flamethrower as an offensive weapon had become quintessential to the various Marine divisions. When we landed in Guadalcanal in 1941, we only had 40 flamethrowers for the entire 1st Marine Division. By the time we landed on Iwo Jima, each of the divisions had over 480 flamethrowers assigned to the division, and every basic rifleman was trained in its operation. Now in this case, basically in slow motion, we received first contact with the enemy. They're moving up. We'll start laying suppressive fire with the machine gun. Once they basically start receiving enemy fire, the Marines will disembark. Now, one of the advantages of the LVT over the LCVP landing craft is the ramp is in the back. Now, the earlier patterns of the LVTs, the tracked landing craft like that, was they had no ramps. For the Marines to get out of those vehicles, they had to pile over the gunwale. And trust me, that's a long way to drop coming over the side of that vehicle. So the LVT Mark IVs had a distinct advantage. They had a ramp. In this case, we're leaving the ramp down because it had a very bad tendency to getting stuck. And like that, leaving the ramp down. This ramp would drop down and the Marines could disembark right off the ramp. They must be waiting for a general officer to make a decision. Now the ball should start rolling. Make first contact with the enemy. Already a radio operator is called up for armored support. I like that. We don't want to send these Marines in the mouth of a fixed position like that without some type of support element. Now we'll advise as these tanks come around and stuff like that, this Mark IV Sherman will be firing blank ammunition, but it will be loud. If you have younger children and stuff, I will suggest you cover their ears. Although you've heard a lot of ski stories about the Mark IVs in Europe and like that, and being underpowered and under-armored compared to their German counterparts, this was not necessarily the case in the Pacific Theater. The Japanese never looked heavily into armor development and never developed anything over a medium-sized tank. So our IV Shermans, like that, were excessively effective against Japanese positions and the Japanese armor.
Holy shit.
Warned you it would be loud. Now we're starting to lay cover fire. The Marines are now disembarking. Look at this first. The fire team is going to be a close perimeter protection team. Along with them will be a flamethrower. The other rifle squad is going to deploy to the left with the tank and start using the elements of the fire and maneuver we talked about. Laying no smoke, hopefully to, like say, to cover their movement. Now bear in mind, although this is an In reality, they would be receiving heavy fire from fixed positions. Both the Japanese machine guns and riflemen, oftentimes basically unexposed in bunkers or some other type of facility. Now again, we talked about the flamethrower. That's going to be the focus of this assault to be able to take out this fixed position. Unfortunately, even with the cannon fire coming out of the Sherman and small arms fire, the Japanese are too well dug in. This was a common traitor there. I like that. So ultimately what they're going to have to do is close with the fixed position and using the flamethrower, the mask, and basically incapacitate the opponents inside the bunker and then close with small weapons and assassin charges to take it out. Now you look at the flamethrower, everybody thinks about it as a horrific weapon like that, and you're going to burn the enemy. But the goal here was not to burn your enemy like that, it was using the basic physics of the flame for using burning oxygen. If you surround a bunker where you can't get to them otherwise, what you're going to try to do is suck out the oxygen, incapacitate it, until you can close and use other weapons to take out the enemy. There's the doc doing his job, constantly moving from fire team to fire team to make sure everybody's all right. You see the importance now like that of breaking down into smaller elements of fire teams. Like even in an open ground like this, with the noise going on and such, maintaining control of the various elements became a problem. And unfortunately, we did not have the direct communications radios we have today. Why do you think Goody yells so loud?
Probably fell in.
What's that?
Probably fell in right there.
See your platoon leader constantly calling out directions, making sure there are people moving where he needs to move. That flamethrower operator, he's got to hang you back. The reason why? He's carrying 70 pounds worth of gasoline and liquid on his back trying to run to keep up with the rest of these Marines. Now that'll lighten up very quickly here shortly, but during that time, like that, imagine not only running through this terrain, but running through Sugar Sand Beach of Iwo Jima. This is the most hazardous part of the flamethrower operator's job. While the rest of the platoon is giving cover fire, he has to advance. Now advance, he's carrying, like say, was 70 pounds worth of high octane gasoline. Very quickly though, if you were on a bunker, even if that flame could not get to you, hopefully that's going to incapacitate you enough that once he's done, the rest of the Marines are going to be able to fight through and use explosive charges and small arms to take out the opponent. Now imagine some of you, even from a distance, has felt the heat coming back here. Imagine being on the receiving end of that. More importantly, imagine being the operator under constant fear that a Japanese round's going to come puncture your tank and all like that, and you're going to go up in a ball of flame before you can take out the enemy.
Where's the grab the card? Fire going now.
Normally they would fight through, not only taking out the position they just assaulted, but make sure there's no ancillary positions or, like I say, defense in depth that they have to deal with. Now, this would be typical of an assault operation using fire maneuver and using support weapons such as the LVT and the Sherman tank. Like that, a lot more fire would be applied, as you can see here and such. But to put this again in perspective, we talked about, this was still about the human element. And to close with, like I say, a little anecdotal story before the Marines get back around here, I want to pass on to you. Imagine this exact same type of situation. This is from a gentleman I interviewed several years ago, like I said, unfortunately just passed on, a World War II vet. He was part of a flamethrower, blowtorch, and corkscrew team. At that time, they would take these Mark II flamethrowers, pair them up, and add 2 Browning automatic riflemen in support, basically creating a fire team of their own. One flamethrower would lay cover fires, the other one would advance. The BA Armor were there as assistant gunners and also to cover their flanks, because any position they're going at is going to make sure that there's other positions that are covering that position. This Marine talked about as he advanced all across the shore in Iwo Jima when he landed, that he was part of this blowtorch and corkscrew team. He watched his mate with the other flamethrower going up through the sugar stand, carrying just 70 pounds worth of flamethrower. He had already charged his tank, as you saw me do to this Marine, like that, pressurizing the material tank and like that holds the gasoline, the gelled gasoline. Now again, contrary to what you see in the movies, it's far more horrendous if these tanks get punctured. They do not explode right away. What happens, basic physics comes into play. You puncture that tank, sometimes the operator may not even know the tank has been punctured. What happens? The gasoline is going to follow the path of least resistance. It's going to come out, form a vapor cloud, mixing with oxygen. And any ignition source from that point on that it hits, including the igniter in the gun group itself, will send them up in a ball of flame. Well, that's exactly what happened to this Marine. A Japanese round went into his tank. We'll never know for sure whether he actually knew it got hit or not. But a few seconds later, this Marine I was interviewing talks about that his partner goes up in a ball of flame. Pretty horrendous way to die. He turned around, this Marine said at that point that he was petrified. He dropped to the ground and urinated himself right there, and rightly so. He was scared to death. But he knew that a lot of Marines' lives depended on him doing his job. Didn't matter how afraid he was. This Marine pulled off his belt, his legging laces, anything he could use to make a rope to drag that flamethrower behind him and get as far away as possible. He continued to crawl forward, dragging that flamethrower over 75 yards until he got close enough to the enemy position to take it out. He put the flamethrower back on his back, like I say, took out the position. They finally blew up the position with a satchel charge. The bravery of that Marine saved a lot of Marines' lives today. It wasn't about the technology. In fact, it was overcoming the technology that he had to utilize, because it was not a user-friendly weapon. But his training, his discipline, his courage, and his esprit de corps, and like that, it wasn't about being brave. It was about being afraid, but being willing to overcome that fear and still doing your job. This is what we need to thank our veterans for. This is what makes us the generation we are today. Because every generation, that human element, makes us who we are. We are today, as a United States Marine, I can thank having the reputation we have as Marines today. It's not about what we've accomplished in the last 10 years, the last 20 years, but what we have accomplished in the last 250 years since the country was established. And for all of us as citizens, we can be proud of what we are today because we stand on the shoulders of the accomplishments and the sacrifices of every generation we come before us. So hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, once this demo is on, just look around. The veterans from all wars that we have here today, thank them for their time and service. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you very much for your time.